This is Jeremiah 51 and 13. You are in the NLT. You are a city by a great river, a great center of commerce, but your end has come. The thread of your life is cut. In the KJV, O thou that dwellest upon many waters, abundant in treasures, thine end is come, and the measure of thy covetousness. I like to start off by saying, Barak Yahweh, Barak Yahushai, Kol Holoim La Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem, Bachak Wadash. Double honor to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who be well. Blessings and salutations to the hopeful elect that's scattered abroad, the Akim and the Aquath that's listening in. Yahweh Ratazah, Lord willing, that the lesson is edifying. It's the brother Shawab. I'm back at you with another lesson and going into the title. All right. Iran needs no missiles to collapse America. All right. And I'm gonna read Jeremiah 51 and Salaki, I just lost it. 13 again. And it says, O thou that dwellest upon many waters, abundant in treasures, thine end is come, and the measure of thy covetousness. All right. And America is known for, their trade routes. All right. They have so many different ways of trading, and that's how they have become abundant. All right. Through all these different, countries, also these other countries being able to become abundant off of them. Okay. So, the time has come that the Lord is about to end that. All right. And one of the biggest ways that they make money has always been through the petrodollar. All right. And I'm going to show you a video, all right, showing you that Iran doesn't need to shoot missiles to collapse America. All right. Iran could just literally destroy America on the petrodollar itself. Okay. Because once the petrodollar is finished, all right, in America will collapse. All right. And this is what this video is about to tell you. Okay. Shalom, Sister Yahweh, Bashem Yahushua Barakatah. All right. So let me grab this video. It's about a 13-minute video, but it was speaking some knowledge up in here. All right. Give me 1 second. It's playing now.
That nobody ever taught you in school. Something that explains more about the modern world than almost anything else you could possibly learn. And I promise you, let me tell you something that nobody ever taught you in school. Something that explains more about the modern world than almost anything else you could possibly learn. And I promise you, once you understand this, you're going to start seeing global news, global conflicts, and global economics in a completely different way. Because there is one single mechanism that holds American power together. One foundation underneath everything. The military, the economy, the political influence, all of it rests on this one thing. And that thing is called the petrodollar system. Most people have never heard of it. And that's not an accident. See, when people try to explain why America is so powerful, they usually talk about the military. They talk about technology. They talk about the size of the economy. And those things are real, but they're not the root cause. They're the result. The actual source of American dominance is something much more specific, much more deliberate, and much more fragile than most people realize. It comes down to oil. And more specifically, it comes down to the currency the world uses to buy oil. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to the early 1970s. Before that, the global financial system worked under something called the Bretton Woods Agreement. Under that framework, the US dollar had a very specific guarantee attached to it. Every dollar in circulation was backed by gold. Any country holding dollars could exchange them for actual physical gold stored in American vaults. That's what gave the dollar its credibility. That's why the world trusted it. It wasn't just paper. It was a claim on something real. But then America got into serious financial trouble. The Vietnam War was extraordinarily expensive. The government was spending money it didn't have.
And that's a key point right there, right? You said they got into basically a deficit. They got into trouble. All right, let me go back.
Dollars on something real. But then America got into serious
financial trouble, right? Basically, they put themselves in debt. And America will be one to always put themselves in debt. Why? Because America's always trying to wage war on another country, you see? And the scriptures talk about that in Habakkuk. Let me grab that real quick. This is Habakkuk, all right, 2 and 6. And it says, shall not all these, all right, take up a parable against them and a taunting proverb against them, saying, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, how long? And to him that laddeth himself with thick clay. All right. And when you go into thick clay, it goes into him that puts himself in debt. All right. And that's why you always hear about America being in a certain type of deficit. All right. I believe right now we're in a $1 trillion deficit, more than that. All right. But that word, Salakia, that word thick clay, all right, goes into it says weight of pledges, all right, heavy debts, you see, pawned goods, something pledged, okay, something pledged, example, pawned goods, all right, so it goes into just straight debts, period, okay. Then you go into the root word of that, and it goes into abata, yeah, abat. All right. It says to take a pledge, give a pledge for a debt. Okay. And that's what ends up happening with America. They'll try to come into certain type of pledges, you know, peace treaties, all right, for the debts. All right. And they always turn back. They turn against it anyway and pretty much put themselves in more debt at the end of the day. All right. It also says here to interchange. Okay. It says Strong's definition. It says to lend. Okay, on security, to entangle. Okay, and that's what they'll do. You know, in a certain way of lending. All right, they'll tell these other nations that they'll pretty much secure them. Right, they'll have their back. You know, they might trade off with military weapons and things like that. All right. It says figuratively to entangle. All right. Borrow, break ranks, fetch a pledge, lend surely. Right. That's in the Strong's definition. When you go into the Jacenius Hebrew lexicon, it says to change, to exchange. Excuse me. It says to exchange, to give a pledge for anything borrowed. All right. And these are things that America would do. Okay. Well, if you give us this, we'll have your back. If you give us this, we'll pretty much, give you this back in exchange, So with that being said, let's go back to what he was saying.
Vietnam War was extraordinarily expensive. The government was spending money it didn't have, printing dollars to cover the gap. And slowly, other countries started doing the math. They started realizing there were far more dollars floating around the world than there was gold to back them up. France famously started sending ships across the Atlantic to exchange dollars for gold before the whole thing unraveled. The game was up. And in 1971, President Nixon made it official. He closed what was called the gold window. The dollar was no longer convertible to gold. Just like that, the anchor was gone. Now think about what that moment actually meant. The dollar was now just paper. It was backed by nothing except faith in the American government. Why would the rest of the world continue to hold dollars? Why would countries price their goods in dollars? Why would international trade continue to be conducted in a currency that no longer had any physical backing? America had a serious problem, a potentially catastrophic problem. Because if global demand for dollars collapsed, the American economy would collapse along with it. So Washington went looking for a solution, and they found one in the most important commodity on the planet. The United States approached Saudi Arabia, and they made a deal that would quietly reshape the entire world order. The terms were straightforward. Saudi Arabia would agree to sell its oil exclusively in US dollars. Every barrel to every buyer anywhere in the world will be priced and paid for in dollars, not pounds, not Deutschmarks, not any other currency, dollars only. And in exchange, America would guarantee the survival of the Saudi regime, military protection, weapons sales, political cover, whatever the royal family needed to stay in power, America would provide. The Saudis agreed. Other OPEC nations followed, and the petrodollar system was born. Now, here is why this deal was so extraordinarily powerful. Think about what oil means to the world. Every modern economy runs on energy. Every factory, every car, every power grid, every shipping vessel. Without oil, the entire industrial world stops functioning. And in the 1970s, Saudi Arabia and its Gulf neighbors controlled an enormous share of global oil production. So when they said oil would only be sold in dollars, they were essentially saying something to every country on earth. If you want your economy to function.
And that makes more sense of why he wants to take over all the oil. So everybody has to go to him, basically, right? He took over Venezuela, right? Now he wants to take over Iran, okay? But see, Iran ain't having that. And as a matter of fact, I believe I just heard a video going into, they're doing so bad right now, Amerikka, that they actually have to they have to get oil from Russia right now, all right, at a certain price, okay? And hey, the dollar's collapsing. The dollar internationally, it has no value, all right? So everybody's been dealing with the BRICS nation, right? The yuan, all right, rupees, okay, more than they've been dealing with actual, American dollars, okay? And imagine how much, this is why you're gonna have pretty much an increase going into gas and oil here, all right? Because now that international dollar is not worth anything. So what's gonna happen is that they're gonna have to come, at pretty much BRICS nations prices. Okay. And what I believe it was, I think they were saying for every dollar in America, it's like $50 in the BRICS nation money. All right. So you need actual, I think it was the way it's being said is for $50 of every United States dollar, all right, equals $1 for the BRICS nation. You see? So go figure how much you're going to pretty much put yourself in a more deficit in your economy. Okay. This is why you're going to have things go up on high prices, inflation. Okay. So
you need dollars first. Japan has to get dollars before it can buy energy. Germany has to get dollars. India has to get dollars. South Korea, Brazil, Indonesia, every country that imports oil has to first acquire US dollars. That creates a permanent, structural, global demand for the American currency. Not because people particularly love the dollar, not because the American economy is so impressive, but because the most essential commodity in the world can only be purchased with one specific currency. And there's a second layer to this that makes it even more powerful. When Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states collect all these dollars from selling oil, what do they do with them? They can't just leave them sitting there. They reinvest them. They take those dollars and pour them back into American financial markets, treasury bonds, which means they're lending money directly to the US government, American stocks, American real estate, American financial institutions. This recycling of oil money back into the American economy is called petrodollar recycling. And it is one of the most important.
He just said what they got to lend money. See, that's why it goes back into Habakkuk 2 and 6. All right, going back into those heavy debts where they have to lend. All right. It's lucky.
And least American financial institutions. This recycling of oil money back into the American economy is called petrodollar recycling. And it is one of the most important and least discussed financial mechanisms in the world. Because what it means is that America gets to run a kind of economic model that no other country on earth can replicate. The government can spend more than it earns year after year because there is always a ready market for its debt. The financial markets can grow and grow because foreign capital is constantly flowing in. Asset prices stay elevated, borrowing costs stay low, and the whole machine keeps running, not because of extraordinary productivity or innovation alone, but because of this structural arrangement that forces capital into American markets from around the world. This is why the American economy looks the way it does. It's not primarily a manufacturing economy anymore. It's a financial economy. The real wealth is generated on Wall Street, in the stock market, in the bond market, in real estate. And all of that depends on one thing continuing to function. The world must keep needing dollars to buy oil. But the dollar is more than just a currency. This is the part that starts to explain a lot of modern geopolitics. Because the dollar is also the most powerful financial weapon ever created. Since the entire global financial system is built on dollar infrastructure, the United States has the ability to exclude any country from that system. They can freeze assets. They can block international payments. They can make it impossible for a country to conduct normal trade with the rest of the world.
And that's exactly what they're doing.
Real time.
And that's what they're doing in Iran right now. See, by blocking off the Strait of Hormuz. All right, they're making it difficult for America and anybody that wants to follow with America, okay, and wants to back up America. They're making it harder for them to be able to trade with anybody else, you see? And that's what's going to bring the collapse to America, okay?
Russia, after they can freeze assets. They can block international payments. They can make it impossible.
As a matter of fact, they just blocked off, what's the name of it? Let me see real quick. They just blocked off another one where I want to do a video on that also. All right. As a matter of fact, I'll bring it out in this video also and bring it out in another video. All right. I forgot the name of it. It's a crazy name. Let me find that video real quick. Be right around here. Here, is it this one? No. Bear with me, Salakia. Shouldn't be too far in there. Man, I gotta stop fucking saving all these damn videos, putting them in files. Give me 1 second, hold on. Look, I'm passing right by, it's too far. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to spend too much time looking for it. I'm going to find it after this. But, oh, it's this one right here. There you go. So this one is called...
Happens if both are blocked at the same time. The second route is called... Iran already closed the Strait of Hormuz. Now they're threatening to close the world's other critical oil route. Here's what happens if both are blocked at the same time. The second route is called the Bab el-Mandeb, a narrow 18-mile waterway between Yemen and Africa. Every ship traveling between Asia and Europe passes through it to reach the Suez Canal. Iran doesn't control it directly, but the Houthis in Yemen do, and the Houthis answer to Iran. Iran has already warned if the U.S. makes another move, the Bab el-Mandeb is next. So what happens if both close? The Suez Canal becomes completely useless. Egypt loses its biggest source of income overnight, and every ship between Asia and Europe has one option left: go around the entire continent of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope route. That adds 10 to 18 extra days to every single journey. The world's 3 biggest shipping companies are already rerouting vessels around Africa just in case. And here's where you feel it. Longer journeys mean higher costs. Higher costs mean more expensive products. Everything gets pricier. The Strait of Hormuz carries 20% of the world's oil. The Bab el-Mandeb carries 12% of global trade. Iran now controls 1 and has its hand on the other. Iran already closed the Strait of Hormuz.
Man, make it make sense. You know, this is what I mean. Iran is making it hard. All right. This is what's going to bring the collapse of America, because it knows exactly what they're doing. And look how small Iran is according to America. All right. They ain't got as much troops as America has. Okay, America got, I think it was like 400 million, close to 400 million troops, while Iran only had I think it was like, it was very low number. All right, it was just I think it was like maybe like 26 million, something like that. Don't quote me on those numbers. All right, but that goes back to the scripture saying, "Let the weak say I am strong." All right, because compared to America, all right, and when you compare armies to each other, militaries next to each other, you will say to yourself, "Damn, yo, there's no way Iran is going to be able to go against America. America's just way too strong." But look how much stronger Iran is right now in this war, man. All right, because they have the smarts. They know what they're doing by collapsing the society before anything. Okay, so that's heavy right there, you know, because that's all prophecy. That's the weak saying I am strong. All right. In fact, let me see. I might have that video right here next to me too. Yeah, that one I ain't gonna spend too much time looking for. All right, so let me go back to that video, right?
For dollar is also, but the dollar is more than just a currency. This is the part that starts to explain a lot of modern geopolitics, because the dollar is also the most powerful financial weapon ever created. Since the entire global financial system is built on dollar infrastructure, the United States has the ability to exclude any country from that system. They can freeze assets. They can block international payments. They can make it impossible for a country to conduct normal trade with the rest of the world. We watched this happen in real time with Russia after 2022. We've watched it with Iran for decades, with Venezuela, with Cuba. When Washington decides to punish a government, it reaches for the dollar as its first weapon, and that weapon is devastating. But here is the unintended consequence of using that weapon so aggressively. Every time America cuts a country off from the dollar system, every other government in the world watches and learns a lesson. And the lesson they learn is that dependence on the dollar is a vulnerability, that any country at any time could find itself on the wrong side of Washington and suddenly unable to function in the global economy. So they start asking a very rational question. How do we reduce our exposure to this risk? And that question is driving the most significant shift in the global financial system in 50 years. China has been the most deliberate and most serious about pursuing an alternative. Beijing is the largest oil importer on the planet. They buy enormous quantities from the Middle East, from Russia, from Africa, and they have been systematically working to convince oil-producing nations to accept Chinese yuan instead of dollars. They created yuan-denominated,
and that goes to show you how scriptures talk about how China has desired to be just like onto America, because China thinks that they're going to be next. All right, they're going to be next to rule. All right, when in all reality, no one's next to rule other than Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. All right, let me grab this. This is 2nd Ezra, all right, 15 and 47, 46, and it says, "And thou, Asia, that art partaker of the hope of Babylon, you see, and art the glory of her person, woe be unto thee, thou wretched, because thou hast made thyself like unto her, you see, and hast decked thy daughters in whoredom, that they might please and glory in thy lovers, which have always desired to commit whoredom with thee. Thou hast followed her that is hated in all her works and inventions, therefore saith Yahweh," you see. So they want to be just like America, all right? And America, man, is no longer, okay? And America's going to be the last to rule anyway, all right? That's why there's going to be no next for China, all right? Let me grab this. This is Revelations 18 and 3. All right, as a matter of fact, I'll take it from 2. It says, "And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become a habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean bird, and I mean of every unclean and hateful bird. All right, and this is the future prophecy that's coming to America. You already see America falling. All right, but there will be a time when America will be completely fallen. Okay, it says, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Okay. And once America's collapsed, right, there's no hope for the rest of these other nations, because that was their powerhouse. That was their cash cow. All right. Yeah, they can move on. All right. To the yuan, they can move on to the BRICS. All right. But again, the trade will never be the same. Okay. Because everything, like I said, the main artery to the whole operation was always America. All right, that's why the scriptures say that these nations are going to wail once they see that America's destroyed. Okay, because America was that beautiful country that, you know, had made everybody rich through trade, basically. Okay, so it says for all the nation. It says for matter of fact, let me grab it down more. 7, it says, how much she has glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit as a queen and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, who judgeth her. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and fine wood and all manner vessels of ivory and all manner vessels of most precious wood, brass, iron, marble, cinnamon, odors, ointments. And the reason these is all being mentioned, because this is what they have always done through trade. Okay, this is what made them rich. All right, this is what makes these other nations rich. All right, it says wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, beasts, sheep, horses, chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. All right, even down to, you know, slaves and our people being sold, man. All right, using us as slaves to build everything. Even, you know, through this what do you call it? Through the sex trafficking trade, you see. That goes all into these slaves and souls of men. It says, and the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. All right. And yeah, man, that goes to everything that's being traded off, all the way down to oil. Okay. And as a matter of fact, dainty. Let me see something real quick. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second real quick. Yeah, see, dainties, right? It just said dainty. Dainties, when you go into dainties, it goes into oil. All right. It says, because I asked it, does dainties have to do with oil? All right. It says, yes, in certain biblical contexts, dainties specifically, and that goes into Genesis, the 49th chapter. All right. Because when it talks about the tribe of Asher, all right, having dainties, all right, that's why Venezuela is part of Asher, all right, and they have much oil. They're rich in oil. Okay, it says are associated with rich, oily, and fat foods. Okay, so rich, they're rich with their monies. They're rich with their foods, all right, and their oil. Okay, it says often paralleling that's a crazy word to say, paralleling expressions about prosperity and agriculture abundance, like dipping feet in oil. All right, so let's go back real quick. It says, and all the things which were dainty, okay, and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more. Right? The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour so great riches come to naught. Okay. It says, and every shipmaster and all the company and ships and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto that great city? Okay. And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness, for in 1 hour is made desolate. Okay, and that's what's going to come to America, man. This place is going to be done in 1 hour, destroyed in 1 hour. All right, so let's go back to that video and finish that off. It's about 4 minutes left.
Oil futures contracts. They've been theoretically working to convince oil-producing nations to accept Chinese yuan instead of dollars. They created yuan-denominated oil futures contracts. They've negotiated bilateral currency arrangements with trading partners across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Russia, after being hit with sweeping sanctions, moved quickly to price its energy exports in rubles and yuan. Iran has been trading outside the dollar for years, and smaller countries that feel vulnerable to American pressure are quietly building alternative payment infrastructure. Meanwhile, the relationship between China and the Gulf states has undergone a dramatic transformation. Chinese investment is flowing into Saudi Arabia, into the UAE, across the entire region. Trade ties have deepened enormously. Technology partnerships, infrastructure projects, energy agreements. The economic center of gravity in the Middle East is gradually shifting eastward. And Saudi Arabia, which for half a century has been the cornerstone of the petrodollar system, is now openly diversifying its relationships in ways that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago.
And that's heavy because that means that they're not no longer, they slowly moving away from America, moving away from helping America, and they starting to deal with these other nations because they start to see that America is just too much problems, man. All right. Because that's exactly what America's doing. It's just causing more problem after more problems. All right. And this is why eventually the allies of America are going to turn against them. Okay. Going to turn against them. They're going to go to these other nations. All right. And eventually they're all going to conspire together, okay, to basically come up with a master plan to destroy America. All right, because they're basically saying it's either us or them. If we don't do nothing against America, these damn devils going to come over here waging war, right? And if we all just sit down together and conspire against her, we're going to miss her. But, you know, to their mindset, everything is going to be safe on their end, you see? They'd rather risk losing America than risk losing their economy, period. Okay. And they just don't understand that no one's going to be next, you know, because Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shah is going to intervene, period, and destroy all these nations. Okay. It's just that Babylon the Great and our homeland out there in Israel, all right, is going to be annihilated completely. All right. Because of the wickedness that they have brought upon the earth. Okay.
This is the real story underneath so much of what you see in the news. The tensions, the realignments, in way shifting eastward. And Saudi Arabia, which for half a century has been the cornerstone of the petrodollar system, is now openly diversifying its relationships in ways that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. This is the real story underneath so much of what you see in the news. The tensions, the realignments, the competition for influence across Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia. Underneath all of it is a struggle over the future of the global currency system. And the stakes couldn't be higher. Because here is what actually happens if the petrodollar system breaks down. If oil exporting nations begin accepting yuan, euros, gold, or other currencies at significant scale, the global demand for dollars starts to shrink. Countries no longer need to maintain massive dollar reserves. They don't need to keep buying American treasury bonds to keep their dollar holdings productive. And Gulf sovereign wealth funds, instead of pouring capital into American financial markets, start directing it toward Chinese markets, toward Asian infrastructure, toward alternatives. The consequences for America are severe. The government needs to borrow
and that's what they were saying in the beginning, that when they were dealing with America, right, and they were dealing with that petrodollar, that basically everything will be put back into the American society somehow. All right. And see, that's the fear that America has, that they see that once they don't use America, now all these nations around the world are no longer going to put back into American society, man. They're going to put back into one of these other societies, right? They're going to put into these other economies. They're going to put into another infrastructure other than, you know, America's infrastructure. All right. Because now they see that they will not be the powerhouse no more. They will see that, all right, well, damn, everybody done left us, and they're all putting in to China or Russia, you know, someone that's bigger. All right. And that shows them that they're no longer that power source. Remember, their inward thought, okay, Esau's inward thought, that their houses shall continue forever. Okay. And you can look at that in many ways. All right. Yeah, this devil thinks that he's not going to be destroyed. All right. He thinks that his lineage is going to continue forever, but also thinking that his society is going to last forever. You see that? Remember, as it tells you in the scriptures, that America is no longer going to be that lady of kingdoms. Okay. Because she thought she was a virgin that couldn't be touched. You see, she never thought that she would actually collapse. All right. Let's grab that real quick. This is Isaiah 47. And 1, it says, come down and sit in the dust. All right. Which dust represents confusion. All right. And Babylon goes back to the word Babel, which Babel means confusion. Right. So A is going to return upon its own head. Excuse me. It says, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Why is she being referred to a virgin? Because she has never been touched. Okay. She has never felt. She's so spoiled that she's never felt, you know, a true destruction, a true collapse. Okay. It says, sit on the ground. There is no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. You see, let's drop down to 7. It says, and thou said, I shall be a lady forever, so that thou didst not lay these things to thy heart, neither did I remember the latter end of it. Therefore hear now this, that thou art given to pleasures, that dwellest carelessly, that say in thine heart, I am and none else beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. All right. NLT says, listen to this, you pleasure-loving kingdom, living at ease and feeling secure. All right. And why have they been living at ease? Because they've been making money off the whole entire world. Why have they been feeling secure? Because they're military government. All right. Because all this money that they have, everything that they own, right? Esau's got the fatness of the earth. All right. It says, you say, I am the only one and there is no other. I will never be a widow or lose my children. Well, both of these things will come upon you in a moment, widowhood and the loss of your children. Yes, these calamities will come upon you despite all your witchcraft and magic. All right. Yeah, because their great abundance has come through a lot of enchantments, man. All right. There were a lot of sorceries, all right, rituals and shit. Okay. And that's why, that's why the Lord is about to intervene. All right. As the scriptures say, because of riches, injuries and riches gotten by deceit. Okay. The world is translated from one people to another. All right. The kingdom is translated from one people to another. Okay. And Esau was the end of the world, and Jacob was the beginning of it that followed it. So what you see is a transformation between kingdoms, from a wicked kingdom of Esau going to the hands of Yahushua. Okay. Because even though physically Yahushua not here, okay, this word is here, and this word being spoken was transferring the kingdoms, okay, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. All right. So let's go back. 47, Isaiah 47 and 11, and it says, therefore shall evil come upon thee. All right, as a matter of fact, let me take it from NLT. So disaster will overtake you and you won't be able to charm it away. Calamity will fall upon you and you won't be able to buy your way out. See, and that's how they've always done these things, man, trying to buy their way out. That's why they're in so much debt. All right, because the moment they become in debt, they'll go and wage war against another country, take their resources, and now they're able to what? They're able to buy their way out. They'll trade off more. All right, well, you do this and we'll give you that. Okay, there's no more of that, man, because all these nations are pretty much tired of it. Right? It says you won't be able to buy your way out. A catastrophe will strike you suddenly, one for which you are not prepared. All right. Why? Because they've been so spoiled. Now use your magical charms. Use the spells you have worked at all these years. Maybe they will do you some good. Maybe they can make someone afraid of you. All the advice you receive has made you tired. Where are all your astrologers, those stargazers who make predictions each month? Let them stand and save you from what the future holds. You see? But they are like a straw burning in a fire. They cannot save themselves from the flame. You will get no help from them at all. Their hearth is no place to sit for warmth. And all your friends, those with whom you've done business since childhood, will go their own ways, turning a deaf ear to your cries. And that's the allies basically going away from them. You see, that's the world turning away from America, period. Because at the end of the day, all right, what really happens to a true whore, right? Because America's that whore of Babylon, right? The mother of all harlots. What happens with a whore in real life? She becomes a lonely bitch, right? She ends up, she always crying about how she can't find love. She can't find this, and she becomes lonely at the end of the day and pretty much dies alone. Or that's what's going to happen to America. You see, you had all these nations at once, right? You had all these lovers on your side at one point. All right. But now it came down to the point where you burned your bridges. All right. And you became that lonely whore that sat in the dust, all right, in total confusion. Why? Because the pride of thine heart has deceived thee, okay? So let's go back to that, finish that.
To cover its annual markets, toward Asian infrastructure, toward alternatives. The consequences for America are severe. The government needs to borrow constantly to cover its annual.
Oh, annoying. Ain't nothing but fucking Satan. I gotta go back into that.
Never, and I mean never, say sorry to bother you. Sorry to bother you. I appreciate your time.
Sorry to bother you.
Let me tell you something that no in the American economic model. Companies that expanded on cheap debt face crushing repayment costs. Asset valuations that were built on the assumption cornerstone of the $2 system breaks down. If oil exporting nations begin accepting yuan, euros, gold, or other currencies at significant scale, the global demand for dollars starts to shrink. Countries no longer need to maintain massive dollar reserves. They don't need to keep buying American Treasury bonds to keep their dollar holdings productive. And Gulf sovereign wealth funds, instead of pouring capital into American financial markets, start directing it toward Chinese markets, toward Asian infrastructure, toward alternatives. The consequences for America are severe. The government needs to borrow constantly to cover its annual deficits. That borrowing depends entirely on there being strong global demand for U.S. debt. If that demand weakens, interest rates rise, and rising interest rates destabilize almost everything in the American economic model. Companies that expanded on cheap debt faced crushing repayment costs. Asset valuations that were built on the assumption of cheap money forever start to look completely unrealistic. The stock market, which has become the primary measure of American economic health and the primary source of retirement wealth for ordinary Americans, becomes deeply vulnerable. And then confidence becomes the real issue, because financial systems at their deepest level run on belief. The dollar is powerful because people believe it's powerful. American financial markets attract capital because people believe they're the safest place to put money. The moment that belief starts to seriously erode, the dynamics can shift faster than anyone is prepared for. Confidence doesn't leak out slowly and then collapse slowly. It leaks slowly and then evaporates overnight. Now, I want to be honest with you. This is not something that's going to fully play out in a year or two. The dollar is deeply embedded in global trade, in financial contracts, in banking infrastructure built over decades. There is no ready replacement that the world can seamlessly switch to tomorrow. The yuan has real limitations. Chinese capital markets are not fully open. Europe is too fragmented. These transitions are slow and complicated. But slow is not the same as not happening. And the direction is unmistakable. More energy deals outside the dollar every year. More countries building payment systems that bypass American financial infrastructure. More governments quietly reducing their dollar reserves. More sovereign wealth funds diversifying away from American assets. The foundation is not collapsing, but it is being steadily, deliberately, and systematically undermined. Every major geopolitical story you follow connects back to this. Why does America maintain such an enormous military presence in the Middle East? Why does Washington react so aggressively to any country that tries to price oil in another currency? Why is the competition between the US and China so intense and so broad, covering everything from semiconductors to undersea cables to African infrastructure loans? Because underneath all of it is one question that determines who holds real power in the 21st century. And that question is simply this: what currency does the world use to buy energy? Whoever controls the answer to that question controls the global economy. They control who can be punished and who can be protected. They control which governments survive and which ones struggle. They control the flow of capital, the cost of borrowing, the fate of financial markets across the planet. America has controlled that answer for 50 years. And right now, the first time.
And that's why you got Iran cutting that leg off. You see? That's why they have made it hard for them over there in the Strait of the Hormuz, right? And the other one was the I forgot the name of it again. But I played it earlier in the video. All right. Now by them doing that, that's what's going to cut that's why America's about to collapse. That's what's going to cut the whole leg off of America. All right. And that's when you're going to see them completely fall. All right. Because they no longer have that power to control all of that anymore. Okay. Especially with all these nations, especially their allies starting to find a way to go to these other nations. Okay. Because they see America is so damn greedy that they play themselves out, man. They put these other economies and these other nations into, put them in a predicament where they don't need to be in. These people trying to look for peace, right? As in these people trying to keep the flow of life going, okay? Which I did a video about 3 weeks back on that, all right? And it was talking about how China, that's why they're so successful, because you don't see China going out there to wage war on people. China always trying to find a way to build the infrastructure to make another economy even better, you see? Where as opposed to America will always try to destroy these other companies, these other countries, okay, and economies to keep theirs afloat and make theirs stronger and stronger and stronger, you see? That's why it has to fall. That's why it has to fall, because you have taken your level of power to a whole nother range, man. There's got to be a balance, all right? There's no balance with America. These other nations, at least they'll sit there and they'll somehow come up with a way to help each other out. America doesn't want to be helped out. America wants to be the one that you go to. I'm the one and that's it. If you ain't messing with me, well, then this is what they'll do. They'll go to your backyard, all right? And they'll come with their military troops and their military tanks and they start waging war on you. You see? And that's why the scriptures say, that was the end anyway.
In half a century, that control is genuinely being challenged.
Exactly. That control is being challenged, and is being challenged by Iran. And Iran alone, Iran hasn't even had the help of Russia and China yet. Imagine if they were to come behind Iran and help, it'd be a wrap for America, like that. But Iran is showing how weak they were and now how strong they are by just making certain moves on the chessboard, all right, which is ultimately Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, all right? Because remember, the scriptures talk about how the Lord could take something that's so low and bring it into power, right? Is that not what he did with Esau? You know, he the basis of men, you know, he children of fools, you know, and he put them to be the rulers of the world, okay? Took us, that was the top, you know, nation, the royal priesthood, and brought us so damn low. So he's showing you through Iran some power right now, how he could take someone like Iran, so small compared to America, and destroy something so powerful, okay? As a matter of fact, that reminds me of this, 1 Corinthians, all right, which this is talking about us, all right, but just look at it in a spiritual sense of what I'm saying, all right? This is 1 Corinthians 1 and, where is that at? 27, right? 1 and 27 in 1 Corinthians. But Yahweh has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and Yahweh has chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty, and base things of the world and things which are despised has Yahweh chosen, and things which are not, to bring to naught things that are, you see? And that, again, that's talking about how the Lord uses his prophets, right? Because we're at the bottom of society, but he uses us to confound the wise. He uses us to confound those that are mighty, all right? But you can use this sense right now spiritually and how he's using Iran, something so weak, right? To confound those which are so mighty right now, okay? And that does not mean that that the Lord is dealing with Iran and these other nations. And no, I'm just using that as a spiritual sense right now. Okay. So the Lord is using something so weak and can make it so strong. And that's why the scripture saying in Joel, let me just grab that real quick. All right. Joel 3 and 9. Right. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Okay. And that's what you have been seeing. The weak saying I am strong because the missiles that they have, the military power that they have, maybe not so much in numbers, but military might as in weaponry, man. Okay. And they were once quiet. Okay. And now they're what? They are made strong. They're making a lot of noise, all right, which they were always in some type of war with them anyway, all right? But you basically had all these years Iran in the cut just preparing for a day like this, a time like this, okay? Which it was really Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, all right, preparing them for war because the time of prophecy will come to play out, okay? And this is the stead measure being fulfilled right now, as the scriptures say, you know, the Lord stirs them, and he does not stir them to the set measure be fulfilled. All right. So for a while, all these nations weren't able to be stirred up into these wars and be able to cut off Babylon. Why? Because it wasn't that time yet. Prophecy was still in full effect, but we're on the Lord's time, man. All right. So we're not on our time. We're not on our time of the watches on our hands, man. All right. We are in Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai's time. So whenever the Lord came to bring that prophecy to pass, it was going to come to pass. And it's happening right now. All right. That's why, you know, we've been telling you that this war is going to lead. All right. What's going on with Iran is going to lead to World War III. Okay. It's going to lead to the beast taking the whore. It's going to lead to all these nations around the world coming up against Babylon the Great. All right. Because the pride of thine heart, that their heart has deceived them, man. They have said to themselves, they're a God and there is nobody else beside them. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much the point I just wanted to make. Let me see. I grabbed this. I ended with this. This is Jeremiah. Because like I said, that was an interesting video I passed by. It just came out randomly on my feed on the YouTube. This is Jeremiah 5 and I'll take it from 7. It says, Babylon has been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine. Therefore, the nations are mad. Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. How for her? Take balm for her pain. If so be she may be healed. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her and let us go everyone into his own country, for her judgment reacheth unto heaven and is lifted up even to the skies. All right. When you read that in the NLT, it says, I'll take it from 7. It says, Babylon has been a golden cup in the Lord's hand, a cup that made the whole earth drunk, and the nations drank Babylon's wine, and it drove them all mad. But suddenly Babylon too has fallen. Weep for her, give her medicine. Perhaps she can yet be healed. We would have healed her if we could, but nothing can save her now. All right. And there's nothing that can save America. America's on a full collapse right now. All right. It's taking times little by little. All right. Because that's how the Lord do these things, man. He going piece by piece in America. OK. The Lord wants to see the terror. The Lord wants to see he wants to see it suffer. You see, the Lord could just end this shit right now. OK. Yeah, it wouldn't be no fun to the Heavenly Father, man. He wants to make America feel that shit little by little, infrastructure by infrastructure, you see, till it's totally wiped out of the way, according to prophecy, you see. It says, but nothing can save her now. Let her go, abandon her, return now to your own land, for her punishment reaches to the heavens. It is so great, it cannot be measured. Okay, so hey, man, that's what's coming. All right, be prepared for this this collapse. All right, and that's what's going to issue. All right, is going to issue in this MOTB. Okay, because he gonna try. Remember, all these nations are starting to go with these other nations, right? So he has to keep. He gonna try to keep himself afloat here in America. Okay, even though he could care less about his own territory. All right. He's more coming down on us with great wrath because he has a short time, because the judgment that the prophets are speaking against it. You see, we're prophesying against Babylon, man. You see, we're prophesying against Mount Seir. All right. So what his job is going to be is to bring the MOTB here in America to keep his little system, his own little system afloat, and eventually trying to get all these other nations to follow after him, right? As it tells you in Habakkuk 2 and 5, he's going to try to heap all nations together, all right, into one, all right? And that's not going to fly. You know, it's not going to fly at all. You see, that's what's going to have all these nations come up against her eventually, okay? But, hey, prepare for that collapse, all right? And it's right around the corner, man, all right? So keep an eye out for that MOTB being made mandatory. All right. So with that being said, I'll end it off there. Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Call Haloim La Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Bahak Wadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Blessings and salutations to the hopeful elect that scattered abroad. The Akim and the Aquat that was listening in. Yahweh Rataz, our Lord willing, that the lesson was edifying. To the next one, Shalom. Keep fighting the good fight of faith. And doing as good soldiers of Yahushua. You sisters continue to learn the sounds, watching True Men of the Lord. And hey, stay prayed up. All right. Continue to pray that Babylon the Great becomes destroyed. All right. ASAP. All right. That Yahweh Bashem Yahushua come back with a speedy riddance. All right. And continue to look up, for our salvation draweth nigh. All right. So shalom.